They thought they could take everything from her, her land, her history, her family's legacy. For generations, this black woman's property stood untouched, a rare piece of inheritance in a town where black ownership was always under threat. Developers circled like vultures, and when a powerful HOA arrived, they didn't ask. They didn't negotiate. They built. 96 shiny new homes rose on land they didn't own, confident she was too weak, too quiet, too old to fight back. But what they didn't know was that every nail hammered, every driveway poured, was tightening the noose around their own necks. Because she had set a trap so devastating, the entire neighborhood was about to pay the price. The story begins in a quiet southern county, where history still lives in the soil. On the edge of town stretched 40 acres of fertile land, owned by one black family for more than a century. It was rare land, not because of its value in dollars, but because it survived the endless wave of dispossession that stripped so many black families of their inheritance. At the heart of it stood Evelyn Carter, a woman in her late 60s. Her grandparents had been sharecroppers, scraping together every coin until they could finally purchase those 40 acres. To Evelyn, the land wasn't just property. It was living proof that her family had endured when everything else was stacked against them. For decades, developers had approached Evelyn with smiles and contracts, promising her wealth if she sold. Every time, her answer was the same: no. The offers grew larger, but so did her determination. Then came a homeowners association with far more money and arrogance than those before. They dismissed Evelyn as stubborn, as irrelevant. They called her land unused, wasted, and ripe for development. Behind closed doors, they drew up blueprints imagining streets, sidewalks, and a subdivision where Evelyn's roots once stood. What they didn't realize was that Evelyn wasn't naive. She knew this fight was coming. Quietly, patiently, she studied property law, tracked her taxes, collected documents, and guarded her inheritance like a soldier preparing for war. She knew the day would come when they wouldn't just offer money, they would try to take. And when that day arrived with bulldozers and contracts, Evelyn was ready. It began with small signs. Surveyors appeared at the edges of Evelyn's property, driving stakes into the ground and marking lines with bright orange paint. Evelyn stood on her porch, silent, her eyes locked on every move. Then came the heavy trucks. The rumble of engines tore through the quiet countryside as trees fell and soil was overturned. She filed complaints with the county clerk. She sent letters to the mayor's office. She walked into government buildings holding her deeds, pointing to maps that bore her family's name. But her words were brushed aside. Officials told her it was too late, that the paperwork had been handled. It wasn't just indifference, it was complicity. The HOA believed they had won. They were wealthy, politically connected, and overwhelmingly white. They looked at Evelyn, a solitary black woman, and assumed she was powerless. They mailed her letters filled with legal jargon meant to intimidate. They pushed forward at full speed, believing that by the time she figured out what was happening, the homes would already be sold. But Evelyn had something they didn't: patience. For years, she had studied the way black families were stripped of their land. She knew the tricks: clerical errors in county records, fraudulent surveys, intimidation campaigns. She also knew the only defense was airtight proof, and she had it. Evelyn had preserved original deeds dating back to the Reconstruction era, signed tax receipts covering every single year, and legally certified surveys that drew her property lines without question. As construction progressed, she took photos, collected documents, and logged every incident of noncompliance. She knew that if she fought too soon, they'd brush her aside. But if she waited until the homes were built, until buyers had moved in, until the HOA had invested millions, they would have everything to lose. And so she let them build. 96 homes, driveways paved, streetlights shining, families unpacking boxes in homes they didn't know stood on stolen soil. Then Evelyn struck. She filed a lawsuit so massive it sent shockwaves through the county courthouse. Her claim: she was the rightful owner of the land beneath the entire subdivision. Every home, every street, every brick belonged to her. The HOA scoffed at first, calling it frivolous. However, as the evidence accumulated, their arrogance gave way to fear. Lawyers whispered about irregularities, judges raised eyebrows, and homeowners began to panic, realizing their dream homes might sit on land that was never legally theirs. The trap had been sprung. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Homeowners filled the benches, pale with dread. The HOA's lawyers wore forced smiles, masking their unease. Evelyn's attorney stepped forward, stacking documents on the judge's bench. Original deeds from the 1800s, survey maps, tax receipts. Each piece of paper hammered a nail into the HOA's coffin. Evelyn had proof her family never abandoned the land, not for one single year. The HOA's defense crumbled under scrutiny. They claimed Evelyn hadn't used the land. They claimed she gave it up by not developing it. But the law didn't bend to arrogance. Ownership wasn't about who poured concrete. It was about who held the deed. And Evelyn held it, indisputable and ironclad. When the verdict came, it was like a thunderclap. Evelyn Carter was the rightful owner of all 40 acres, including the subdivision and all 96 homes built upon it. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Some homeowners broke down in tears. The HOA's leadership sat in stunned silence, their empire reduced to rubble by a woman they had dismissed as powerless. Evelyn stood tall, her face calm but unyielding. She hadn't just won for herself, she had won for every ancestor who had been cheated, erased, or silenced. Her family's legacy still stood, rooted deep in the soil they had fought so hard to claim. The verdict sent shockwaves across the state. The HOA faced financial ruin. Title companies scrambled to explain how they overlooked Evelyn's ownership. County officials were dragged into investigations. For homeowners, it was a nightmare. They now lived in houses that legally sat on land they did not own. But Evelyn wasn't motivated by revenge. She could have demanded they leave. She could have sold the land for millions. Instead, she offered leases, fair legal agreements that allowed families to stay, but on her terms. She didn't want their homes. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted justice. Her victory became a symbol far beyond her small county. Newspapers ran headlines about the black woman who beat the HOA. Historians used her case to highlight how black families had been systematically robbed of land for generations. Activists pointed to Evelyn's win as proof that knowledge, persistence, and courage could expose corruption even when the odds seemed impossible. Standing once more on her porch, Evelyn watched the subdivision bustle with life. Children rode bikes down streets paved without her permission. Lights glowed from houses built on her soil. But this time she didn't feel anger. She felt a sense of power, the power of having defended her ancestors' sacrifices, of proving that their story still mattered. Evelyn's fight was not just about one piece of land. It was about the thousands of acres lost through trickery and intimidation, about families forced out without a voice. Her victory asked an uncomfortable question. How many Evelyns never got the chance to fight back? And so I ask you, when the next Evelyn stands to defend her history, her land, her dignity, will we stand with her or will we look away? Tell us in the comments below.